Okay, so this is my spoiler review of It Chapter 2. Now, understand I was a huge fan of the first movie here, and I was so excited about this movie coming out that I've actually read the whole book of It this summer. And if you don't know, It Chapter 2 and It Chapter 1 are all from this one book, and there was a miniseries in the 90s based off of the book as well, which had everything from the book. And what you have to understand here is clearly that there wasn't any adult parts in the It that we saw recently in the first movie, and that came into play here, whereas in the book and the original miniseries, they went back and forth between adult and kid, like it's written. So what I've noticed is that I think strategically by the studio, the first It, they kept in all the good stuff from the book, which is mostly with the kids. And once I read the book, after seeing the first movie, I realized that the kid parts are the best parts by far, and that the adult parts were all pretty boring and disappointing. And I was actually disappointed in a lot by the book It. It is not a page turner. It has great parts in it, but those parts that are memorable and that you love and fall in love with are all in the first movie. So it felt like this studio was like, hey, you know what? Let's, in this first movie, make sure this is a hit. Let's get this to work. It is a remake, and Warner Brothers need to hit bad. And it worked. It made a great movie. It was like the Goonies version of It. And now you're kind of eating your cake here because this movie felt a trap of dealing now with all the boring parts of the book and not having a balance. And that is the adult parts. And man, were they bad. And I didn't have high expectations for this movie. I love the first movie, but I knew this would be kind of an issue. But I thought it would still be pretty good, but it was pretty boring. I'm going to jump first actually into the casting of this movie. I think that the casting was perfect except two people, and that would be the big stars in James McAvoy and Jessica Chastain. My problem with James McAvoy is he did not translate well to me of the original Bill, the kid, and I didn't feel that sync up, like this was the same person grown up. I think that was just a miscast. I don't blame James McAvoy for this. I think it was forced having him play Bill, and I do blame him though for, I think he did the stuttering really well. His acting's always good, but why did he decide to have slip in there his voice? If you've seen the movie Split that he stars in, when he does the same voice in It, that sneaks in here and there, and it just feels really weird and out of place. That is not Bill. Now, Jessica Chastain, I thought she played Jessica Chastain. She was not Beverly to me. I know she has red hair, but that is not enough. Beverly is charming, and there was none of that charm translated from the brilliant portrayal that Sophia Lillis did of Beverly as a kid. That there was no charm. And Jessica Chastain also dropped the ball here to me. She wasn't good at screaming, and that's actually underrated technique in acting, and a lot of actresses are amazing at it, and some, there is something to being a scream queen, and Jessica just wasn't great at it. I didn't buy it every time. It felt half-hearted there, and yeah, disappointing, because I do like her other stuff, but I feel like she dropped the ball here and again was just a miscast. Everyone else I thought was perfectly cast, chillingly cast, especially Stanley's adult counterpart looked just like him, and that includes Eddie here as well. And I gotta address, obviously, Bill Hader. He nailed it, but he was also getting a little too much praise, I thought. I mean, people were tweeting that this was an Oscar-worthy performance. No, it was really good, and he did solid, but come on, that role doesn't even have that opportunity there. And yeah, I'm fine with who they casted as Ben as well, and I really actually thought the best one was the actor who played Mike Hanlon grown up. He is exactly what I imagined in the book, and I thought he translated the best from his child counterpart, and I would say next up after that, obviously, is Bill Hader. The actor who played Eddie's adult counterpart teetered on overacting a little bit, but he was still very good. So I actually disagree with the choice here of really not making a bigger deal about Bill's current wife, Audra, who's supposed to represent someone who looks just like Beverly. I think that's a strong actual part of the adult storyline and the heart and soul of Bill's choices here with Beverly, and I don't think it was smart to cut that out. I know they're trying to save time, but the things they decided to keep in, I think they might have messed up there. I also think that they also should have kept in more with Beverly's abusive husband, because in the book it really does work well in retrospect to her having an abusive father, and they did not play that home at all. So I thought those are bad choices, because what made the first movie so great was the heart there, the soul, and the connection to the characters, which here felt soulless, and I didn't feel any weight to these adult counterparts at all, like I did with the kids. So as much as this book material they were working with wasn't strong, they weren't helping themselves either by actually ignoring some of the better stuff. And that includes just the simplicity of the main story here, which is Georgie. The heart and soul of this story of it is Bill's loss of his brother. They tickled that story here in this movie, but they kind of forgot about it, and that was a big misfire. I mean, that's the base of the first movie, and to just let that go and not make a bigger deal of that, especially at the end, I did not like that, and I think that also should have been brought up more even in the last closing scenes, and it wasn't. Now, I was a huge fan of Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise in the first movie. He's still always great, and he's great here, but he does seem a little off and not as in his zone, I feel like, in consistency as Pennywise in this one as he was in the first. There's moments it didn't feel like the same clown that I remember, and that might just be his voice at times, but he is a shapeshifter, so you can let that pass a bit. But I thought there were some really weird scenes, especially the one with him and the little girl in the bleachers. One, because there was so much dialogue with Pennywise there that it made it feel odd, and that we were actually getting to know him, and it didn't feel like what Pennywise was presenting himself as. It was just like this guy that's a clown, and there was no point of that scene. That was just one of the countless scenes where there's no point to it. Like, why did we see this girl get killed in his bleachers? What did that lead to? It led to literally nothing in the plot. And you could even say that it was a stretch, just the story of Pennywise killing the kid in the funhouse that Bill was after, that was just there to be there. And it wasn't a strong plot link here, and they were trying to make it and gives Bill, our lead, something to do, which just felt very weird. I think that Pennywise's appearances were all disappointing. They weren't creative like in the first one. They were just, you knew the jump was coming, you knew the scare was coming, and it would just turn into something CGI based and way too heavy on it, and not believing enough in Bill Skarsgård to let him do that just clown side of Pennywise. It was always CGI, and the CGI seemed dated. That was hugely disappointing, because come on, you can't be cheap with this as a studio, Warner Brothers. Like, this is your baby now. It was a hit. Why in the second one wouldn't you put all the money into that? And they didn't. They focused more on putting money in de-aging these kids, which was very weird looking. If you see in the flashbacks, obviously the actors of Richie, Eddie, and Ben were de-aged in different ways, whether it was Ben's face was altered a bit, and they actually shrunk Finn Wolfhard, who plays Richie here, because he got so tall. And if you've seen the actor of Eddie in Shazam, he's gotten much older looking as well, so they messed with him a bit, and it just felt weird watching that. I didn't think it was the best de-aging effects, especially with Richie. I felt like I was just watching a weird video game happen here, and that took me out of it, that he wasn't really there. And a lot of the humor here didn't land. And I expected it to land more, and it really didn't. I mean, it was some pretty lame joke writing. I think the best humor, obviously, which would be expected, was any improvising by Bill Hader here. But other than that, I mean, there was some tonal issues here. They didn't know exactly what they wanted to be this movie, and I think that screamed completely when Eddie, as an adult, gets all that sludge shot on his face, and they play that music to make it like a comedy. And it was like, what is this? Like, I don't understand. Is this now trying to also mess with Marvel humor? And that's frustrating, because that doesn't fit it to me, and they tried doing that a lot in this. Especially like when Richie and Eddie see the cat through the doors, and it just is like a dire situation, but they have to stop it to have this humor. And that's totally the Marvel thing they do in their movies, and it just took me out of it there too. I was like, come on, what are you trying to be here? Don't be so business-based in these decisions and what works for audiences. It worked. Just stick to what worked. That's what was just so frustrating about this movie. And that's also with sequels having that trap of wanting to be bigger, and that makes it better, and it usually doesn't. And that comes just with the grand finale here, where it was like this giant spider based off the book idea, but it was just becoming a CGI fest, and I always hate that. And you've seen that in my reviews, I just hate when they fight a big monster and it's just too long. They just drag that scene out, and you just don't feel the same weight as you did when, in the first movie, when they're fighting Penny at the end, he's changing in all things they're afraid of and you're connected to. So that was the problem. This just became your classic, typical blockbuster monster movie. And honestly, I felt zero tension in this movie and suspense. And that's a huge problem too. And that has to go on the director, it has to go on the editors, and it has to go on the writer here. And you got to understand, you see that it's the same writer and director from the first movie, gives you hope, but there's always a little reason behind writing and why it could downgrade. And of course, two of the writers from the first movie aren't on it. You can already see a difference here. You got to notice those little details in casting and crew, because it makes a whole lot of difference, and it always comes back to the writing here, and it was weak. But giving writer a little credit, Stephen King, who I love, but also is not perfect, and it is overlong, the book, as was this movie. And unfortunately, this movie is really tough to get through because it's just the really boring parts of the book. And that also goes for Stephen King's writing as well. I did like the Stephen King cameo. Again, though, felt like the Stan Lee cameos of Marvel, but I still think that kind of worked. You can get away with that, but again, stop trying to be all the other big blockbusters. You already were in your own way. So that's a lot of criticism I've thrown at it, but the positives for me were, again, I think besides those two in James McAvoy and Jessica Chastain in casting, I thought was excellent. You couldn't have done a better job. I think the kids were still great actors here, and their chemistry is off the charts, which I wish the adults could have emulated better. I think that, man, there's really not much I liked about this movie. I think the editing was pretty good for what it was given to edit with, and I think that they had really good transitions from one time to another. They did that really smoothly, and that felt like there was effort put there, but the rest just felt like a mishmash and a slog. I'm going to give this one a harsh rating, and it actually doesn't even have to do with me being super hyped about it or anything like that. It's just what I watched, what I saw happening as a movie, it was not good. So I'm giving it a 5.5. I think they should definitely just let this rest now. It's a disappointment. It's a disappointing sequel. There's been a lot of those in Hollywood lately. And I think obviously business ruins and money a lot of these decisions, but I was just upset because I thought it would stay true to good writing and focusing on what that heart that the first one had, and they just didn't. It just became your middle of the road monster movie that also, again, wasn't scary and got cheesy at times. So 5.5 for me. Let me know what you thought of this movie down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and please subscribe so you don't miss one of my reviews. I do a bunch of movies, TV shows, and I also do interviews as well, so check those out. And please follow me at SteveVarley1 on Twitter and Instagram for more of me, and I'll see you next time.